Now, 6 steps to change behaviour in the food industry could reduce global carbon emissions by a fifth. That's according to a new report from Planet Tracker, a financial think tank that seeks to drive positive financial outcomes using environmental data. Well, the recommendations include requiring fully traceable supply chains, halving food loss and waste, and an end to the funding of deforestation. Well, joining me now is Peter Elwin. He's Director of Fixed Income and Head of the Food and Land Use Programme at Planet Tracker. Peter, morning to you. Without going through the 6 points, because we won't have time for anything else, these are things that you want investors to press big food to do.
Yes, that's exactly right, Ian. Thanks for having me on. So the problem with the food system is it's basically eating itself. It's destroying the natural capital base on which it depends. It's creating a huge amount of climate change, and it's not even succeeding in feeding the people successfully. In fact, 20% of deaths worldwide are actually due to dietary reasons. So if anything, it's having a negative impact on the very people it's supposed to be feeding. What we want to see financial institutions do is to really put their shoulders to the wheel and drive the transformation that the food system actually needs. And you mentioned the sort of 6 actions that we've set out. We've laid out a strategic framework that we think they can use that involves making the system much more efficient, but doing that in a way which is actually sustainable, reducing pollution, and also crucially, really changing the way that companies actually make and sell their products to consumers. So going for a sustainable production model where consumers aren't left with the responsibility for sort of changing their behavior, because we all know how difficult that is, but we're actually wanting to persuade the companies to do that themselves, to really design good food and to sell good food to us in a way that persuades us to eat it. Rather than relying us changing our habits in the face of strong advertising.
Absolutely. One of the things that I found really interesting in the report was you did a breakdown of where most money from investors goes in the food system, and the majority of it is for manufacturers and distributors, far more than, say, retailers, certainly more than the farmers.
Yes, that's right. We've done a detailed analysis of 400,000 companies in the food system, which is still a fairly tiny slice of the overall number operating, but they're very much the biggest ones. And as you say, a large majority of the capital being invested in the business is going to the manufacturers. About sort of 60% of the funding in the food system is going to them. A large part also going to food service companies and food retailers. And then a relatively small slice, less than a fifth, going to the producers. And that's a problem because ultimately it's the producers, at that end of the supply chain is where the harms are occurring. And we really need to see capital being refocused upstream to assist them with the changes they need to make.
Peter, you mentioned 400,000 companies that you looked at there. What are the key data points?
So the really interesting thing about that is that a lot of the sort of capital, as I say, is coming from the equity markets. They're actually really important. The revenues are very much concentrated amongst the large companies. As I say, we looked at 400,000, but within that, just over 1,000 or so are public. They account for 50% of the revenues in our database. So a very large proportion of the revenues across the whole system are being captured by a small number of very large companies. And a lot of the profits in the system are at the downstream end. So in terms of the overall profits, 47% of the profitability in the system being captured by retailers and food service companies, another 34% being captured by the food manufacturers, and really a tiny portion, 13%, being captured by the producers. So again, we can see that heavy weight of money and profitability at the downstream end, really lacking at the upstream end.
Okay. Peter, good to talk to you this morning. Thanks very much indeed.
Thanks for having me.